I know I'm losing you. I feel it all the time. And I know if I lose you, then I'll lose my mind. So lie to me, make me believe everything you say. Just lie, 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 lie. I'd rather have it that way. Nobody told me that you were cheating. Oh, it's just a feeling I have. But if I'm right, you'd better lie to me. Then I won't feel so bad. Because the truth would only hurt me, and that price is too big to pay. So lie to me, I'd rather have it that way. Now you may think I'm foolish for saying what I've said, but the truth could mean I'd lose you. So tell me a little lie instead. Tell me that you love me, and I'll believe every word you say. Even if you lie, 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 I'd rather have it that way.
Welcome back. David Penn here. Professor Penn podcast. Well, this is a special one. It's number 100, which I'm going to call the Centenary. And we're going to take a look back at the previous 99 episodes. You know, remember when we were in school? I remember I was in high school. And there'd always be this class where the teacher would say, review. We're going to review what we've learned so far. And it was always a great day because I didn't have to pay attention. Well, hopefully today I'll come up with a screaming presentation that will keep you riveted. And I'm certainly glad to be here. I want to thank you for your viewership and your listenership. I want to thank Free People Radio for giving us this platform. I always direct people to precinctstrategy.com for a tutorial on everything you need to get into the game of politics. We started out with Brook Benton, the famous Brook Benton, and his big hit, Lie to Me. And why did we do it? Well, for those of you that are new, because we got a lot of newcomers here, I don't know, maybe about 50 episodes ago, we had quite a time here in Minnesota. We have a congressman here in CD6, Minnesota. His name is Representative Thomas Emmer. And Representative Emmer is the House Majority Whip. And he was the salesman for the debt ceiling bill that Kevin McCarthy put together with the Democrat and passed. And Emmer went out and touted this thing as the greatest cut to government spending in government history. And I read the bill. It was 99 pages. And there was $2.5 trillion of proposed cuts, depending on whether or not future Congresses could get together and agree to enact those cuts. And I said at the time, well, that is highly unlikely because if past performance is any predictor of future outcomes, the deficit's just going to keep going and the debt's going to keep growing. And there was a 1%, what they call a sequestration, which, you know, it's like an automatic cut if they can't come to an agreement. I think it was like, maybe it was $800 million a year. I can't even remember. The number was so small compared to a $7 trillion budget. It was, what we call in the Federal Register, de minimis. And I went out and I did a podcast or two on this thing. And this young activist here in Minnesota put those podcasts out in front of about, 10,000 Republicans. He just sent it out, and boy, did it cause a bombshell. So I had this lie to me thing because, we as American citizens like to be lied to. I think George Carlin did a bit on this about 25 years ago. We like our politicians to lie to us, and they're very willing to do it as long as we accept it. That's why we say one of the things we're doing here on the Professor Penn podcast, I say constantly, I'm not saying I know what the truth is. I say that we're searching for the truth together because by and large, well, you end up $34 trillion dollars in debt. 34 trillion. You have an open wound of a border where, 10, 15 million people are pouring across every year. And then you're in an endless war. So that's what happens when our politicians lie to us. And this review or this looking back, this centenary, uh, there's a beautiful martial art called Tai Chi. It's the slow moving art. So people look at it and they go, oh, that's not very powerful. Actually, it's called the Supreme Ultimate because you're only looking at the wrapping on the package. And every one of those moves has a physical application, a uh, internal application, and a spiritual application. And there's a move, that says "Old Monkey Looks Back." So what that whole move is about is, from a movement perspective, it's got a martial intent, but from a spiritual perspective, when we reach a certain age, we start to look back and we want to understand how we got to where we are and why we are who we are, and open up the possibility that at the end of our lives or at any time in our lives, we can allow change to take place. And we're looking back now at these first 100 episodes, but we're really looking back at how we got as American citizens into an endless war that impoverishes the people. Because that's where we are. And if we really think about it, it's crazy. I mean, that there's all this thing, I'm looking at all the media and there's all this continuous drip, 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 drip that if you're a right wing or a Republican or you're a Trump supporter, you're a cultist. A cultist. It's quite disparaging. But really, you have to be cultic to agree to a forever war that never ends that makes people poor. I mean, you have to be in some kind of a trance, right? So we're waking up. This is what the podcast is about. The Professor Penn podcast is the search for truth. We're looking back over the first 100. We thank God for having the first 100. And let's get serious about that. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the light and the dark. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating me in your image. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me an American. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for making me free. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for healing the blind. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for feeding the people. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for releasing the bound. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for raising up the downtrodden. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for creating the heavens and earth. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for providing for all my needs. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for directing my path. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for our American courage. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for crowning America with glory. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for restoring strength to the weary. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds. Thank you for sending your Son to die on the cross that I might be saved. Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. Pardon me, my King, for I have willfully transgressed. For you pardon and forgive. Blessed are you, God and King of all worlds, who is gracious and ever willing to forgive. A big part of this for me is the unbalanced nature of our culture. We're a country, and our country has a culture. And because we have a very diverse population, our culture is also diverse, but not really, because the bedrock of our culture, the bedrock, the culture being the post World War II Democrat liberal order. It doesn't matter if you're black or if you're white, if you're old or if you're young, if you're native born or foreign born, brown, red, green, whatever. We're all living in the post World War II Democrat liberal order. And that order stands on two illegitimate pillars. The first illegitimate pillar is the scientific method which gave birth to the atomic and hydrogen bombs. In other words, the order we live in is enforced by coercion, not adopted through consent. I'm going to say this again because this is the illegitimate nature of our country, our politics, and the Democrat liberal order within which we live. This is the defining element that unites all of our diverse cultural experiences. Democrat liberal order. Order. Democrat liberal order. The order, the cult, rests on two illegitimate pillars. Science, the fruits of which for our country were nuclear weapons, so that our country has a supreme position, a hegemonic, this order, which is bigger than our country, spread it out wider than our country, but our country is the bouncer, the bully, the muscle that defends the order, the cult, and it's illegitimate. It's coercion. It's coercion through military, coercion through nuclear weapons. And the other pillar, illegitimate and undermining of people's well being, is free trade, because nothing is for free. Now, this was an experiment, free trade. The idea being, going back to Thomas Paine, that commerce could link countries together and create bonds of friendship that would minimize conflict. This part was an experiment, the free trade part. The nuclear weapons part was an experiment. Both pillars are illegitimate. We experimented with nuclear power. We have the power to destroy every person on this planet. That is not a way to run the world. And we say, well, we can never get off of it. BS. It's culture, and the people can demand disarmament and peace. And this free trade thing, it didn't work. It just didn't work. And Thomas Paine said, if that doesn't work, we have to go back to the spiritual approach. And that's what this podcast is about. I'm not anti-science and I'm not anti-trade, but I am seeing the incredible imbalance towards materialism and the diminishment of spiritual insight, which makes people unwell. So we've proposed here on the Professor Penn podcast a new politics that's focused on the well-being of American citizens, a new politics where we are working together to create a new politics that is focused on the well-being of the American citizens. If you're new here, I'm getting to go over it. It's like that review class. Johnny, you were late. You missed 3 classes. Come on in. We're going to give you another shot at it. And I'm going to try in one session today to go over the high points of what we've been through since day one. I mean, we've been through 99 other episodes. I mean, there's a lot of details, and you can go back and look at it. But the high points today, that we are living in a culture, a worldwide culture, that's dominated by the Democrat liberal order, and it's illegitimate, and its illegitimacy is on full display. And that's what the search for truth is all about. Now, we talked a lot about, through many, many podcasts, colonialism, or and as I like to call it because um, I have a particular disdain for the British colonial model, which was slavery, drugs, and piracy. Slavery, drugs, and piracy. That is the business model of the United States of America. We now have debt slavery, although with all these new arrivals, as the Biden administration calls them, people that do not have status, do not have familial bonds, do not have social networks, come to the United States without resources. Then the government gives them resources, but many of them slip off of that track and become slaves. And I've actually seen it with my own eyes, where I've seen a person in a relationship where they were actually enslaved, without status, without green card, without money, without the ability to speak the English language, no job, a slave, a slave to a conservative. And I say this because, he told me who he was. And I thought to myself, wow, you're a conservative. You're not a Democrat. You hate Trump. You're a self-described conservative. Yet, you lack the spiritual borders to treat another human being with respect. In other words, to treat your neighbor as yourself. You're a materialist, you conservatives, and you believe in low taxes, low regulation, and a military and a police state that protects you. And apparently, at least in this one case, because I have the evidence of my own experience, you're willing, from a material perspective, to enslave someone. Okay, great. That was a high point of the last 99 episodes. I'd have jacked this guy up. But I was told by this woman's friends, don't do it. She doesn't want to be sent back to the country from which she came. I said, okay, lie to me. She wants to be lied to. If we as American citizens continue to accept these lies, that lie being the government is going to take care of us materially and in terms of our safety, and we trade our freedom for that materialism and for that safety. In other words, they put some shiny objects on the table and we say, oh, sure, here's my freedom. Give me those objects. We're going to be enslaved. And debt slavery is a big part of it. This is the British colonial model. What we're living in, we might not be able to recognize it. I mean, this is the interesting thing. When you're in a cult, you think that's the truth. And we are actually living in a cult. The Democrat liberal order is a cult. And we know it. I mean, more and more of us know it every day. And it's based on, and it's a development out of the British colonial model or the European colonial model. And that model, that European colonial model, has nothing to do with the spiritual world. In fact, anytime they sent out missionaries as part of their colonial project, that was called wrapping evil in the cloth of faith, because the European colonial model is based on the fundamental belief that one race is superior and another is inferior. And that's why we had this tremendous problem created in the world where people are oppressed. And of course, now we say, well, it's white people. It was not white people. It was the divine right of kings in association with the Catholic Church, the European countries, Spain, France, England, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Portugal. I mean, these people, the Netherlands, these people all got in on it because for whatever reason, maybe it was God's plan, maybe it was serendipity, I do not know, their interest in and their development of technologies which allowed command and control and domination, came forth quicker than other groups that sought to live in harmony with nature. In other words, a more spiritual and more balanced perspective. And this materialism, of course, which was based on the scientific method, spread throughout the globe, and with it spread the illegitimate pillars of nuclear weapons and free trade. But but the paradigm itself creates the conditions for the continuation of the colonial model. And how does it do it? Because these people who are, when we went over this a long time, these are PhD. Who benefits from this model? Who, well, first we should say, who's the purveyors of this model? Because it's the left and leftists and liberals and conservatives who reject the spiritual movement. And I've said in many podcasts, this is very similar to what happened in Germany in the 1930s, where you had the fascists, the communists, and the Christian Democrats. Let me rephrase that, because on the far left, the workers' movement was the communists, which would be akin to our Democrat Party here in the United States today. And then you had the fascists, which was also a leftist workers' movement, but with a different organization of political economy, and that would be akin to the conservatives today. And then in Germany, you had the Christian Democrats, which would be akin to the people of faith, who are disparagingly referred to as the MAGA crowd or the Trumpists. And that's all going to pass away. The underlying ideas, these three groups, this is about a political realignment here in the United States of America. And what we're realigning around is an understanding of this business model, this British business model of debt slavery. We're $34 trillion in debt, drugs, omnipresent in our society, omnipresent, drugs, okay? And then piracy, which is war. And the Democrat liberal order has decided, the cultists have decided that democracy and all of its virtues are the end of history. That every country in this world, given a chance to self-determine, a la the Atlantic Charter, which we covered in great depth, the Atlantic Charter, which Roosevelt forced Churchill to agree to, which allowed for self-determination of all people, quickly became, yes, you can self-determine as long as you self-determine that you're a democratic country. And if you're not a democratic country, we're going to label you part of the evil empire, and we're going to kill your ass. If you don't comply, we're going to coerce you with our control of nuclear weapons and with our control of free trade, which means the U.S. dollar. Illegitimate pillars upon which this whole enterprise rests, and the enterprise itself, that every person in the world needs to be in a democracy, that's illegitimate. That is illegitimate. We have to get out of this cultic thinking that somehow democracy is for everybody. Who are we to tell other people? We have the Atlantic Charter, which says people get to self-determine how they govern themselves. Yet, we're trying to turn everybody into Democrats, make them part of the Democrat liberal order cult. And if they don't comply, which of course people don't comply because they have their own thinking, they have their own cultures, they have their own histories. If they don't comply, we're going to wage a forever war and impoverish the people to pay for it. Which means what? The whole thing is a scam of the highest order. So please, Jamie, could you please play number 2? Because I want to share with you what I think we're doing here in our government.
Who could resist? Anywhere else in the country, I was a bookie, a gambler, always looking over my shoulder, hassled by cops day and night. But here, I'm Mr. Rothstein. I'm not only legitimate, but running a casino. And that's like selling people dreams for cash. I hired an old casino pal, Billy Sherbert, as my manager, and I went to work. For guys like me, Las Vegas washes away your sins. It's like a morality car wash. It does for us what Lourdes does for humpbacks and cripples. And along with making us legit comes cash. Tons of it. I mean, what do you think we're doing out here in the middle of the desert? It's all this money. This is the end result of all the bright lights and the comp trips, of all the champagne and free hotel suites, and all the broads and all the booze. It's all been arranged just for us to get your money. That's the truth about Las Vegas. We're the only winners. The players don't stand a chance. And their cash flows from the tables to our boxes, through the cage, and into the most sacred room in the casino. The place where they add up all the money, the holy of holies, the count room. Now, this place was off limits. Even I couldn't get inside, but it was my job to keep it filled with cash, that's for sure.
They had so much fucking money in there, you could build a house out of stacks of $100 bills. And the best part was that upstairs, the board of directors didn't know what the fuck was going on. I mean, to them, everything looked on the up and up, right? Wrong. The guys inside the counting room were all slipped in there to skim the joint dry. They'd do short counts, they'd lose fill slips, they'd even take cash right out of the drop boxes. And it was up to this guy right here, standing in front of about $2 million, to skim the cash off the top without anybody getting wise, the IRS or anybody. Now notice how in the count room nobody ever seems to see anything. Somehow somebody's always looking the other way. Now look at these guys, they look busy, right? They're counting money. Who wants to bother them? I mean, God forbid they should make a mistake and forget to steal. Meanwhile, you're in and you're out. Past the jagoff guard who gets an extra C-note a week just to watch the door. I mean, it's routine. Business as usual. In, out, hello, goodbye, and that's all there is to it. Just another fat fuck walking out of the casino with a suitcase.
Starring Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci. And we know Robert De Niro is just a far leftist, and probably Scorsese also is a far leftist. But they've left us a gem here in this movie, and I recommend all of you watch Casino. Have you ever seen this movie, Casino? You have, great. Because, you know, here's what I'm going to propose to you. Casino, that's our country. It's a metaphor for the United States of America. Let me tell you what's going on here. The guys that run the casinos, that, you know, it's like Lourdes for humpbacks, or, you know, these people are criminals, but you put them in the politics and all of a sudden they're heroes. Those are the politicians. Those are the people we elect to run the country, the politicians. The board of directors that are upstairs that don't have any idea what the hell's going on, that's we the people. We're the board of directors because, you know, it's government, you know, by the people, of the people, for the people. So we're up in the boardroom high and, you know, we're high. Okay, that's what we are. We're high. We're not paying attention to what's going on. We're just not. The count in the count room, that's the skim. That's where all our taxes go. That's where all the money goes. That's where the created money goes. That's where the fiat currency goes. Into the count room where it's stolen. For example, this year they did an $88 million audit of the Pentagon's weapons inventory of $4 trillion US dollars that I paid for. And guess what? Half of the inventory could not be accounted for. That'd be called the skim room, because the skim is the scam. You can go back and look at the podcast. The skim is the scam. But we're up in the boardroom high, We're not paying attention. We don't know what's going on. The entire point of the country and the casino is to take the players' monies away. You heard what he said. We don't have a chance. We're suckers, right? So who are those players? The taxpayers. The taxpayers are the suckers. And all the workers in the casino and all the hangers-on in the casino, all the workers in our country, all the hangers-on that don't have a job, we're all now dependent on the casino for our living. The government. This scene, go back and look at it. We're living in a casino. It's a scam. The whole thing exists just to take our money and our energy. And I'm going to tell you what. They've gotten very good at controlling resistors. Because, see, in that casino, if you watch the movie, there's people that are robbing in there and there's fighting. They just want the continuous and unimpeded robbing of the people so that a handful of politicians and insiders can skim the take and run their scam. So they want to make sure that if there's any resistance, any pushback, they have a way of dealing with it. Could you please play number 3? Now, I'm going to give this a setup. This is Dr. Strangelove. We'll talk about this afterwards. In the late 50s or early 60s, I said this before. It's amazing to me that this clip is even available. This is Herman Kahn. We'll talk about him in a minute. A futurist, a scientist at his Hudson Institute, funded by the CIA, laying out the framework for the security state we live in today. Could you please play that, number 3?
"30 miles north of New York City, the problems of our violent age are pondered over in one of America's most influential think tanks, the Hudson Institute. In this 19th century mansion, they are looking for alternative futures, both utopian and dystopian. The end product of this think tank, scenarios, scripts for the 21st century.
Let's admit that the affluence, the skills, the technology will really make life better in all kinds of ways.
Mm-hmm.
But, we also know these things go badly.
Right.
Okay, everybody's worried about the possibilities of various kinds of social controls and so on. What would the scenario be?
Herman Kahn is director of the Institute, Tony Weiner his assistant.
It has to involve the social controls coming into effect gradually and slowly, and at each step as a result of some decision which seems to be very much in the general interest. That is no imposition by an evilly intended big brother.
How are we going to achieve a utopian peace in our cities, even without the bomb? What is the scenario for a utopian peace?
To take a black power movement,
Right.
and one which really is trying to cause problems, to put sand in the gears.
Right.
And you've already set up a good deal of this social watching.
Mm-hmm.
You've got your TV cameras everywhere, you've got your data processing, everybody has his ID card, you've double-checked it.
Mm-hmm.
And now, all of a sudden, you've got these guys that are throwing sand in the gears, and you clamp down. That is, you keep track of every car. You keep track of this is easy to do. You keep track of 10% or 100% of conversations that occur on telephones.
One could, with a computer capacity that will be available in the next couple of decades, one could easily record every phone conversation made. And then one could easily scan mechanically. No human being could spend the centuries that would be required. One could scan every conversation looking for keywords that would identify the conversation as worth looking into a little further. So that, for example, one could begin with a naive set of words. Kill, rob, murder, assassinate, plot, conspire.
You can do more than that. You could imagine temporarily tranquilizing a whole city. It's been upset, been riots.
Mm-hmm.
Let's put transguarders either in the air or in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Just
mm-hmm.
get people settled down a bit. I can imagine a good deal of preventive medicine going on in this kind of state.
Mm-hmm.
Where you really check up with everybody and you see that they keep their drug levels right.
Yes.
In fact, the first thing you do when you go into to work is they punch you and check your blood and see that the drug level is what it's supposed to be.
So you'll buy the safety of your city at the expense of the privacy of individuals, and for most people, most of the time, the intrusion will not be the kind of thing they'd be conscious of.
So the scenario for a utopia without violence is achieved at the expense of your private life.
Well, that's quite, I'm going to suggest you go back and listen to it again. Hard to hear Herman Kahn. He speaks kind of strange, doesn't he? Strange. I'm not even sure he was born in this country. Something I'm going to look up. So you heard what they said. Now think about the evil majesty of this. None of these technologies existed. They sat down in an institute funded by the CIA and dreamed up a security state in the late 1950s. And then our government, unbeknownst to us up in the boardroom, because we're all high, funded our academic institutions and created an academic environment where the technologies to create this kind of control were invented. And I've been very brutally frank about my disdain for our academic institutions because they're completely dominated by Marxists and they're completely dominated by science. And it's pretty hard to find anything spiritual at one of the dirty dozen elite institutions, the Princetons, the Harvards, the Columbias, the Yales, University of Chicago's. All of our problems as the American people emanate from the graduates of these institutions. They do not think like we think. They are the priests of the Democrat liberal order, and they're completely benefited by it and incorporated into it and on the payroll of it and will kill to maintain their positions. And here's where it started. In a paneled room in the Hudson Institute where they dreamed up a security state, and they said it so sweetly, this Tony Weiner. Anthony Weiner. I looked it up. They're not related. But, they're closely aligned, okay? And he said you got to give up your private life to be safe, and you'll be happy to do it. You got to go through a series of steps where it's not Big Brother taking things away. You actually consensually give your freedom up because you think it's good for you. Safety. But what is your private life? I don't know if they were trying to be tricky or that's just how they thought about it at the time. But my private life, my internal life, that's where my spiritual boundaries are. That's where my freedom is. My freedom does not lie in my ability to, go get high or, go to a strip club. That's not freedom. Freedom is the spiritual boundaries that I'm free to choose. Well, they say that is yeah, of course. If you want to go to a strip club, and if you go to strip clubs, I'm not judging you. None of my business. I'm an American citizen and so are you. Or somebody just texted me from Sweden. If you're in Sweden and you like going to strip clubs, or if you're in Cuba, or whatever it is you're doing, I'm not in judgment over you. You're a citizen, and you are an experiment with your life, and I'm making an experiment with my life, and we all experiment, and the outcome is our longevity and the quality of our lives and the well-being of our children and of our parents. But I personally want to have the freedom to create my own internal spiritual boundaries within my private life. In the Chinese ancient philosophy, which is very important to the Chinese still to this day, and it's something that we need to study here in the United States because we can learn from everybody on their philosophy, their thinking. They have three categories that they divide the world into to study it, just like we have mind, body, and spirit. They have Nei. Let me start over. They have Wei, which is the external, the musculature, what you can see and feel. They have Nei, which is the inside strong. And then they have Shen, which is the spiritual world. So they have the physical, they have the internal, and then they have the spiritual. And our spiritual boundaries, that's inside the house. That's Nei. So when these people are talking about taking away my private life, giving up my private life in exchange for safety, They're talking about taking away my freedom to choose my own spiritual boundaries. And isn't that exactly what's going on in the Democrat liberal order? Do we not have a society which tells people, hey, whatever you want to do, it's good for you? Whatever you want to do, go. They don't even say it's good for you. They just say, go for it. Go for it. I'm going to play next week a woman here, a legislator here in the Minnesota legislature. I got a clip of her saying that it's wrong for parents to tell their children who and when to have sex with. And I'm thinking, what's the point of being a parent? I mean, come on. They're my children, and I can't create spiritual boundaries for them. That's creepy. She said it's creepy. Creepy? Man, it's pretty creepy to me that we're going to send our kids out there and say, hey, let it rip, Clip. You don't even know, your ass from the grass, but you're going to go find out. The whole point of passing on a culture from father to son and from father and mother to daughter, and I should say from father and mother to son and daughter, because, we are not discriminatory. We believe in the rights of every American citizen. But the point of passing on a tradition is to save our children from making mistakes that they do harm to themselves. And they're saying, hey, let them go wipe themselves out. It's a casino. Let's see how it turns out. This is not a well-being culture. This is an abusive, usury culture, which injures people and then has paid mechanisms to help them maintain themselves. That'd be the drug part of debt, slavery, drugs, and piracy war. The drug part. Go screw yourself up, and then we're going to put you on the comeback to keep you in the game. Man, it's so aggravating. And it's so simple when we understand it. I mean, when we actually, come to understand this, when we understand what's going on, that's why the podcasting is so powerfully destructive of the Democrat liberal order narrative, because we're sitting here talking to each other. We're forming a community. You're talking to your friends and your family and your coworkers, and you cannot suppress the free exchange of information between individuals unless you're going to come out as the Nazis you really are. I didn't put in here my extensive coverage of the Nazis and Nazi infiltration into our elite academic institutions. But we had an operation run by our CIA, at that time was called the OSS, called Operation Paperclip, where they admit to bringing like 3,000 or 4,000 Nazi scientists into this country. And of course, the Nazi scientists said, well, I'm a physicist, but my friend over there, he's an anthropologist. If I go, he goes. So we brought over all these social scientists and scientists and put them right into our elite institutions, and they were Nazis. And there was another group that came over that were communists. We imported the European intellectual tradition, such as it was, and it's a mess, into an academic tradition that had rejected the European colonial experience. We were a European colony, just like India, just like Yemen, just like China, just like so many countries in Africa, in Central and South America. And we had a revolution in 1776, and we said, we reject your colonial empire model of slavery, drugs, and piracy. We reject it. We're out. Yet these people were so smart, and we were oh so willing to bring into our academic institutions that tradition, which in the most fundamental sense is a rejection of Christianity. And if you think about it, and we talked a lot about it, and this is the review part, Charles Darwin and, the origin of the species and the survival of the fittest, which justifies colonialism. In other words, if I'm strong enough to enslave you, that's an advancement of humanity because the strong survive. Come on. These people were on the Crown's payroll. They're just coming up with a cover story why they were robbers. They were the people skimming in the count room off the whole world. And they came up with a whole scientific philosophy that they paid for to say, yes, we did, and it was the right thing to do. It's called The Origin of the Species, Competition, The Survival of the Fittest, which negated Genesis, which is the fundamental cornerstone upon which Christianity rests, which says, love your neighbor as yourself. And the Darwinian model says, if I'm strong enough to make you my slave, hey, slave, go get my slippers. Two different visions of the world, right? And then, Darwin had a cousin named Spencer, Herbert Spencer, who made this species competition, individual members of a species, into a social competition between countries and cultures. And then there was another one at the same time, Galton, who became a master mason in a year because the crown put him into that position to spread through the Masonic lodges and temples throughout the world this concept of Darwinism, this concept of slavery, drugs, and piracy, and to operationalize it by developing a highly trained group of people who function within secret societies. We do have secret societies. We're not going to go into that on the review, but it's back there. I think there's a podcast called Secret Societies, because that's where people get training to do things that are not part of the mainstream. The mainstream culture was what in this country? The colonists came here, many of them, to practice their own authentic form of Christianity and throw off the European intellectual tradition. And this was a Christian country, and, it's not anymore. It's now the Democrat liberal order. The cultists won. The Masons won. The Satanists won. The Luciferians won. We're playing a backgame, if you know backgammon. We're not done yet. But boy, the dice better roll in our favor or we're going to get wiped out. And that's why we're, working so consistently to create a community. I got a text this morning from Leland. Thank you, Leland, one of our fundamental community members. He said, man, how do you stay at it? Where do you get the energy? Every day you're doing it. And I'm going to tell you, it's not me. It is not me. I have opened my life. I have given my life. And I'm not perfect, and I'm working on it all the time. Don't think I'm like into some kind of ego thing here. Man, I fall way short, and it drives me nuts. Didn't sleep a wink last night. Drives me nuts. The addiction to sin is horrifying. But I'm really putting sin down because I know to the extent that I do, I'll be more available for the spiritual to come through me, to be participating in this great effort to save our self-governance. Our self-governance. This country is about self-governance. These people, Herman Kahn, these intellectuals, these elites, these PhDs, think we the people are stupid, mud people, and in large part because many of us, and I do, I believe in God. People believe, these people think that believers are stupid. They just have not discovered, or they reject to discover, faith in their own lives. And that's okay. We're not trying to create a theocracy. We're just not going to let a bunch of people that are materialists have 100% control of the bus because they're going to drive us right off a cliff with their endless war. Because over time, even at one time, they had some limits, spiritual limits, that had come down culturally as they became disenfranchised from the spiritual. Well, they had kids and they had kids. You get down 3 generations, and wow, these people are stupid. And I'm going to say this because I've been around for a while, and I remember the PhDs of the 60s, and these people were sharp. They were educated, and they were interested in teaching their students how to critically think. They really were not brainwashing people. They really thought that, man, if you thought about it critically, communism is the only answer. But they let people work through it on their own. They taught them how to think. They taught them logic. This group now, these people are not well educated. They got the titles, PhD, MD, Juris Doctor. They've got the titles of lawyers and doctors and PhDs. They've got all of the reward and accolade for being that. They're on the payroll of the Democrat liberal order, also known as the New World Order. They're on the payroll, they're getting the benefits, but they're stupid, and they certainly don't care about the people they're supposed to serve. They've broken the social contract. And all we have to do is recover our self-governance. We're going to talk about that downstream a little bit. It's an appetizer. But what Herman Kahn and his ilk were about, their theory of the case was people must be controlled because they can't self-govern. I don't agree with that. This is a cultural issue. People make decisions about how they behave based on the cultural choices that are arrayed before them. And we've really destroyed the spiritual aspects of our culture and replaced it with materialism. When I was a kid, on Sunday, the gas stations were closed. There were no malls. Everybody went to church and spent the day with their family. And I mean everybody. We had 3 television stations. 3. 1, 2, 3. You know, it was a different world. And if you're born, in the 80s or 90s, you have no concept of what it's like that on Sunday, your only option is to go to church and have a meal with your family. Nothing else to do. It was the law of the state. And then, of course, because we have a big land-grant university here in Minnesota, started generating PhDs that started to get involved in politics because they had a plan. They changed it, and they knew exactly what they were doing. Just like Herman Kahn sat down in that wood-paneled room in the late 1950s and laid out the security state, and then the government funded all the technology necessary to impose it, the world we're living in today. Well, it wasn't always this dark. This came from a lot of different directions. Because after World War II, when this liberal order was imposed, it was a first turning. 88 million people had died in 5 years. And while there were some very evil people that were imposing this order and they knew exactly what they were doing, the people had spiritual boundaries because they had just watched the carnage of a worldwide cataclysm. Please play number 4.
There are few earthly things more beautiful than a university, wrote John Masefield in his tribute to English universities, and his words are equally true today. He did not refer to towers or to campuses. He admired the splendid beauty of a university because it was, he said, a place where those who hate ignorance may strive to know, where those who perceive truth may strive to make others see. I have therefore chosen this time and place to discuss a topic on which ignorance too often abounds and the truth too rarely perceived, and that is the most important topic on earth, peace. What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana, enforced on the world by American weapons of war, not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave. I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time.
Thank you. Well, I'm sure almost all of us recognize that's President John Kennedy, who was assassinated in 1963. And you can see why he was assassinated. Because the security state had already been established. The Democrat liberal order was already established. And here's this beautiful man who fought in World War II, who was injured severely in World War II, saved some of his fellow sailors, saw combat, came from an incredibly wealthy family, wealthy to this day. This family, his nephew is running for president right now, this RFK Jr. That's Uncle John. And what a glorious, glorious speech. Now, he talks about the universities in a very positive way. And my father, who was the first American academic to look at the work of Darwin and Galton and Spencer and say, hey, these people were racists. My dad devoted his life, and I want to just take a minute and give my father the love and respect that is part of my podcast. Because for those of you that are new and that want to question, the Professor Penn name for me is show business. My father taught in the University of Minnesota for over 50 years. He was the winner of the Distinguished Teaching Award. He was a leader of the anti-war movement in the 60s, and he devoted his life to the civil rights movement. He was not a white liberal in the sense of being a fox. My father was a Jewish man who was devoted to his students, devoted to nurturing them and teaching them how to critical think. I was there in the room. Some of these people had to teach them how to read. Excuse me. So you have I remember a black woman, beautiful woman, passed away now, Anna Stanley. She got a PhD with my father's help. She came out of St. Paul from the old Rondo neighborhood. She couldn't read. My father sat there and read with her. I don't know if it was even a racial thing for him. He believed in the ability of all human beings to search for truth. And although he was a leftist and we didn't agree politically, I respect him so deeply because he attacked the British business model, was fired from the university for it, hid it from me. One of the podcasts I talked about Shostakovich when crosswise was Stalin, and he thought he was going to get arrested. The great, classical composer Shostakovich wrote some of the greatest music of the 20th century. He pissed off Stalin, and he thought he was going to get arrested and go to the gulag, and he went and hid in the back stairs of his apartment building because he didn't want his children to see him being drug away. Very similarly, and I never thought about this. This is on the fly. My father did not tell me he'd been fired. I was maybe, 12, 13 years old. And he didn't tell me because he didn't want to worry me. And he had just turned down an academic appointment at Harvard to stay in St. Paul to take care of my grandparents, who were super religious Jews, and they lived 2 blocks away. And we had a traditional family structure. And he gave up a chance to go to the big show to take care of his parents, which is really, spiritual borders, right? Respect your mother and father. And he didn't tell me. Just like Shostakovich hid it from his kids by going on the back stairs, my dad didn't tell me. He failed to remember one thing. I was already old enough to be in the community, and people came up to me and say, because it was a big deal. It was front page news here. Your dad was fired. He was fired because he was a leader of the anti-war movement, and he was a leader of the civil rights movement. And the universities in the 60s that Kennedy was talking about, they were deeply conservative institutions. They were conservative. They had not yet gone leftist. That was a work in progress, which my father, after they fired him, and he went and fought to get his job back, he was a ringleader of taking those conservatives out. So I was in the room, when the plan was made to turn Minnesota into a leftist state. I was there. And my mother is not happy with me because she knows that I got the faith of my grandparents, not the leftism of my parents, and I'm working not against my parents, but I'm working to maintain balance between the material and spiritual. And as things rolled downhill, people got dumber and dumber, and I thank my father for helping me think critically. But that speech, that Kennedy speech where he speaks so glowingly about the universities, they were wonderful places in the 60s. When I went to Haverford College in 1976, it was already not wonderful. It was leftist, and it was screwed up, really screwed up. And I quit down the road from that experience after being at Haverford and going to the university and other, I was trying to stay in the family tradition of becoming a professor, but I just couldn't do it because the people sucked. They just sucked. And I told this to my dad, and he was very upset with me. And we really had a long period of estrangement because I turned down his great offer to follow in his footsteps. But we eventually reconciled, and we've, really had a great love and respect for many, many years because he was a really fundamentally good person who took on the British business model of slavery, drugs, and piracy, which were scientifically supported by three racists, Darwin, Spencer, and Galton, that my father took apart, the first academic that did. Now, any school you go to, they do it. Hey, you heard it here first, right here in Minnesota and St. Paul. And Kennedy is speaking so eloquently, saying we're not going to have a Pax Americana that's based on the coercion of American military might. And guess what happened to him? American military might blew the top of his head off. At least that's my opinion. And to this day, we really don't know what happened. So we're all speculating. The word conspiracy theory, that phrase, that was created by the CIA. That'll tell you how out in front of things those folks are. As Lenin said, the best way to control the opposition is to lead it. The best way to control the opposition is to lead it. So, we have to make sure that the people we're following are not sellouts. And of course, most of them are, because the lure of the material, the lure of financial success, the lure of the accolades of your peers far outweighs, for most people, tears almost come to my eyes. It far outweighs the entry into the spiritual world that comes by developing spiritual borders and strengthening them through daily ritual and daily practice, which is why we read the prayer at the beginning of every podcast, to set the stage for something special. This is a special place where we gather together to do a special thing. We're sharing with each other. It's an on-off switch. I try to create something that's not mundane, because I'm giving it all I have, and I want all of us to have a chance to give it all we have. And if we do that together, if we find the Spartans that are going to hold back these materialists and rebalance our country and restore some spiritual boundaries, we'll all be well. And that inside work, that Negong, that inside work, those spiritual boundaries, when we practice them over and over again, we enter into the spiritual world. That's the gateway to the spiritual world. People go, I don't believe in God. There's no God. Well, are you practicing anything in your life that could bring you into contact with the spiritual world? And they look at you and they go, what do you mean? And that's what we're trying to do on the podcast. I'm explaining to you what I'm about here. And for those of you who've been watching me from the beginning, I hope it's connecting some dots, or maybe they're already connected. I'm certainly not going to be like a jerk-off, secondhand jerk-off PhD and think you're stupid. I think a lot of you are smarter than I am. And I know that from the comments that I got. Man, somebody went after me, called me out on the Gaza issue, and talked about Malcolm X, who we're going to play here in a second. I want to thank you for doing that if you're watching. Spot on. Spot on. I gain so much from the feedback that I get. And again, all of you can feedback, be in touch. I try to answer. Go to X. Join me on X. Build a community there. We need to build our social networks so we can find the people that we can organize into a political movement. Bring people to the podcast. Click the like button. Leave a comment. Join. Bring people. Spread it out. Share the clips. That's what social media is all about. Now, people use it for entertainment. I see it as a military opportunity. And so do they. Because if you're on X, you know that many of the people that are there are being paid by institutes, foundations, like the Hudson Institute. Where'd their money come from? Where'd they come up with the idea of the security state? These people are paid to sow division, to sow hate. They want people to hate themselves and hate each other, because of people that hate each other and hate themselves cannot organize to throw off the business model of debt, slavery, drugs, and piracy war. They're experts at it. They've been doing it for hundreds of years. You go over and look in the Middle East. Look at all the chaos over there. Who caused that? The European colonial powers caused it. Look at our country. Doesn't it look a little bit like Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen to you? Everybody hates each other. What is that? That's not natural. You got to work at making people hate each other this much. It takes military intelligence. We're not doing that. We have a unifying political idea that is beyond red and blue, beyond Democrat and Republican, beyond left and right. That's a scam. We're staking out a new territory about restoring physical borders and spiritual borders, about turning public debt into private assets, and ending the endless war. That's our political philosophy. And I'm a good salesman, and I think I can sell it. Are you buying it? Well, I think you are, because the audience is growing very quickly. And if you all get behind this and help me grow this audience, this thing's going to explode. You know, we're doing this Hebrews thing, Royce and I mean, we're going to be getting a couple 100,000 views an episode here very shortly. We're on the move together as a community. That's what we're reviewing. Where were we 100 episodes ago? I was by myself in a room. Where are we today? We're hundreds of thousands of people coming together. Now, it's mostly for entertainment. The next step is to get motivated, get organized, get activated, get into your communities, and let's throw off the shackles of the British colonial model and reveal to the people the illegitimacy of the Democrat liberal order, because it stands on illegitimate pillars: coercion and financial manipulation. This is not legitimate. It's illegitimate. The very basis of our country and the order, the cult, is illegitimate. When people see it, guess what? We get a new paradigm. The paradigm of well-being and longevity for all the people. And we had this beautiful man, John Kennedy, and what did they do? They blew his brains out. And we had that first turning after World War II, and there was so much hope. I was there. There was so much hope, so much beauty, so much optimism, so much learning, so much community. Yes, we had problems. Yes, there was discrimination, anti-Semitism, sexism, homophobia. But it was on the move. It was on the move. It was loosening up. It was loosening up. People were coming together. They were coming together so well that we had to have 4 martyrs. They killed the leaders that were bringing this country out of that colonial business model. They killed JFK first. Then they shot X. When I say they, I hope you know who I'm thinking about. I don't have any 8x10 glossies. But you want to talk about taking the boomer generation and turning them into a bunch of narcissistic, inward-looking materialists? Decapitate their spiritualism. They killed the spiritual leader of the boomer generation. They killed them on television, killed them with guns, destroyed them. And with those killings, they killed the spiritual life of the boomers. JFK first, then Malcolm, then Martin Luther King, and finally RFK, the father of our current presidential candidate, RFK Jr. They killed the spiritual aspiration of the boomers. We got afraid. We became inward looking. And then Nixon took us off the gold standard and financialized the country, and it became glorious to get rich. They removed the spiritual underpinnings of our culture by killing its leaders in front of our faces. These were public executions. It scared the hell out of the boomers. And most of them are still scared today. That's why they're willing to give up their freedom for security and give up their freedom for money. They've given up in the Republican Party the soaring rhetoric of Abraham Lincoln and what the Republican Party was as a juxtaposition to the Democrats and the Whigs. These were also materialists, enslavers, right? And Lincoln said, "No way, Jose. We're not making a deal with these people. We're about the freedom and well-being of the people. We're about spiritual borders." Obviously, enslaving people means You have no spiritual borders. You're a Darwinist. You're a British colonialist. And that's who they were. And he started a political movement, or he, shall we say, codified and led a political movement that was already bubbling up. And we entered a new chapter of American history. And we're still working on a more perfect union from that moment in time. But when these people stood up and told the truth, when they stood up and told the truth, they paid the ultimate price. Listen to this one.
Who act friendly toward Negroes. A fox acts friendly toward the lamb. And usually the fox is the one who ends up with the lamb chop on his plate. The wolf doesn't act friendly, and therefore the wolf has more difficulty in getting the lamb chop in his plate.
I'd like to point out, though, that...
And I say that because it is usually if you study the structure of the Negro community, economically, politically, civically, psychologically, and otherwise, it's controlled by the white liberal, who usually poses as the friend of the Negro, who actually differs from the white conservative in the same way that the fox differs from the wolf. Their appetite is the same. Their motives are the same. It's only their mannerisms and methods that differ.
I would agree that...
I mean, talk like that in the 1960s, boom. I hope you go back and listen to it 10 times. What X is saying in the 60s is as equally applicable today. But through his public execution, it's taken 60 years to recover in the black community some of what his insight was. And that's why we're seeing today, after all these decades, black young men finally willing to, professing their intent to throw off the yoke of the British colonial model of slavery, drugs, and piracy. Took a long time. Look what happened. Look what happened. Look what happened. And you know what? It's going to happen again. And this time, as Susan says, to the streets. We're not going to give it up this time because all the chips are up on the bar. They have the technology now to finish the job. They didn't in the 60s. Technology did not exist. It does today to enslave every American citizen in a digital prison. And that's their goal, and they're working on it full speed. So, hey, guess what? Get a checkbook. Knock off those auto pays. Oh, isn't that convenient? All you have to do is point and click and you pay your bills. You know, there's American citizens that are losing their jobs because you're pointing and clicking. And you're getting used that money is pointing and clicking. It's not real anymore. It's pointing and clicking. Stop. An act of civil disobedience. No more auto pays. Cut your credit card usage down to the minimum. Carry cash. Pay in cash. It's not illegal yet. Gum up their system. If every American citizen said, hey, you know what? No more credit cards. That would be no more debt slavery, wouldn't it? I don't want to get too far in the weeds. It's a review session today. God, Malcolm was so beautiful. Unbelievable. So we got a realignment going on. The realignment's being around the issues of globalism and nationalism. Globalism and nationalism. This last 100 years or whatever it was, let's say since 46, where we polarized into Democrats and Republicans and progressively have become more polarized to the point where we hate each other and hate ourselves. You know, this got to stop. We got to stake out a new description of things so we understand what's going on. And we got a wide and large group of people in this country that are seeking global governance, whether they understand what they're doing or not. That's what they're doing. They're globalists. On the left, they get it real well. Conservatives, the conservatives that are rejecting Trump because he's a philanderer and a criminal and all this stuff, which has nothing to do with anything. It's got nothing to do with Trump or Biden. It's about ideas. They're rejecting the ideas of the nationalist movement. And the fundamental idea is spiritual borders. They don't want that. They want no limits on their ambition because they're materialists. That means they're Marxists, because Marx was the abnegation of spirit in favor of a full materialist description of human life. So conservatives, if you're out there listening to me and you find yourself rejecting Trump, you're not rejecting Trump. He's a figurehead. What you're rejecting is the spiritual borders and the growing movement of nationalism underneath Trump. And the reason like people like I, put up with some of this tomfoolery is I look over at the other side that advocates for no spiritual borders, and I'm in between a rock and a hard place. But when push comes to shove, I'm playing for the future, okay? I'm playing for spiritual borders. And these conservatives that want low taxes, low regulation in an empire so they feel safe, they're really Marxists. And we know they're Marxists now because they're telling us. So we're really going to get this down to two groups. It's going to transform. It's going to realign from communists, fascists, and Christian Democrats to globalists and nationalists. Isn't that great? It's very simple. And as that's happening, the narrative that has existed in this country for decades, that's been controlled by the mainstream media, it's just falling apart. These people are starting to sound hokey dokey. Please play number 6.
For years, I've heard many of my Republican and Democratic friends say that China is on the rise and America's falling behind. They've got it backwards. I've been saying it for over 4 years, even when I wasn't president. America's rising. We have the best economy in the world. In 1,000 cities and towns, the American people are writing the greatest comeback story.
We're going to work through this piece by piece, okay? So here's what President Biden is saying. His whole life, his whole life, or not his whole life, but recently, in his recent part of his later life, people have been saying China's on the rise and America's fallen down. But we got the greatest economy in the world. Yeah, he's been to China a lot, probably picking up bags of cash. Excuse me, it's just an opinion. I've been to China a lot, really a lot. My children speak fluent Mandarin. I started studying Chinese culture in 1979. I've devoted my, at least 25 years of study. I'm talking about academic study to understanding Chinese history and culture. I know these people. Okay, they're kicking our ass. They want all of our money. They are materialists in the extreme. They're aligned with the left. Okay, they are. And they're aligned with the conservatives. That's why we have this integration of Chinese business with the left and the conservatives, because it's all about the money. And we have a $600-700 billion trade deficit with China because these people don't care about the American citizens that lose their jobs and become impoverished by offshoring our manufacturing. These people don't care. It's all about them. They're narcissists and they're materialists. But this pablum of American jingoism that Biden is, pitching here is just a lie. The Chinese are the hardest working people on the planet. I know it. I've been there. I mean, the way they're just in terms of their children go to school. First of all, it's a super high competition environment. It's not like our, country now. Like when I was a kid, when I went to school, when we took a test, everybody's test score got posted up on the wall. I had to be number one because I'm, the drama of the gifted child. And I was always number one because I'm very competitive, ultra competitive in every phase of my life. Music, athletics, that's who I am. Hey, I'm getting better not because I'm better. I'm just running out of gas. So I'm a little bit easier to get along with. But when I was young, they used to put those test scores right up on the wall. And that's what they do in China. Now here, everybody gets a participation medal. I remember when I had my young kids and we were in soccer and they started giving out participation trophies. And I was coaching soccer. I said to the league director, "What are you doing?" Well, everybody participated. I said, "So what? Who cares? They didn't win. Why are you giving them a trophy?" But you know, culture changes, and this was part of the leftist movement. And what we've got now is people that don't work very hard. I mean, I own a business. I can see it. My people don't work hard. They just don't. And you go over to China, you talk about the students, they go to school from 8 till 4. They come home. Mom is home, makes the kids something to eat. They're home for a couple hours. Then they go to after school, 6 till 9, 5 nights a week. They give them Saturday off because they go to dance lesson, piano lessons, whatever they're doing because they got lessons. And then on Sunday, they go to all-day school. These kids are really working hard at a level that we as parents here, we can't even conceive of it. The people in the factories, the executives, the administrators, they work, here in my business, people come in at 9 and people start walking up to me about 3 o'clock. I got to go get my nails done. I look at them like, okay, if I ever make money again, boy, you got a thing coming. Because right now, it's a very difficult time for me. So I have to tolerate a lot. But these people work. I mean, they come in the morning, 7 o'clock, they're at their desk. They'll stay at the office till 10 if they have to. Their culture is functioning, hard-working, super productive, very organized and intelligent people. No spiritual, but when it comes to the material, they're beating the living urine out of us. Okay, we're done. These people won. They're winning in every category. This guy's telling us a lie, President Biden. Sounds good, though. Don't you feel good to hear that you're still number one? They're telling you how great your economy is. We're going to do this. Let's play the rest. Play a little bit more, and I'll stop it again.
Never told. Let's bring in right now the U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. Madam Secretary, thank you so much for being with us. First, we're just marveling, as we have for about a year now, about this economy that just keeps exceeding expectations. What's your reaction to the jobs report?
Well, I agree with you. We're seeing very strong job growth. A year or so ago, who would have expected that we could be averaging over 250,000 new jobs a month and yet seeing inflation come down? But that's what we see in this morning's report.
They're running an old grandma out there because, what are you going to do with an 80-year-old grandma, right? She is what you call an actress. And they play with these statistics, and there's an old saying, we've said it before, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. Yes, there's job growth. We're 4 years out from COVID. Remember the job losses associated with shutting down the world economy? So it would be expected that we'd have a lot of job growth as people go back into the job market. She's talking about inflation being down. They just came out this morning and said, whoa, big surprise, inflation's going up much higher than expected. Please continue.
275,000 jobs in February, signaling a strong labor market, the longest stretch of unemployment under 4% that we've seen in 50 years.
Can you stop it, please?
And
just say it's me. I don't believe a statistic that comes out of her mouth. Because when you go in and look up how they come up with these numbers, they rig the analysis to get the result that they want. They're always talking about tax cheats. Here's how a tax cheat works. Here's what I want to pay in taxes, Mr. Accountant. Figure it out. They work backwards from the amount they want to pay. That's how these people do it with statistics. Oh, here's a great talking point. Unemployment's the lowest it's been in 50 years. Go give me a formula that proves it. Please continue.
Market, the longest stretch of unemployment under 4% that we've seen in 50 years, and really no evidence in this month's wage data of an acceleration in wage increases that could create inflationary pressures.
Stop, please.
Americans are getting
Stop,
ahead.
Please. No, there's tremendous inflationary pressure in wages, but they're including all these new arrivals. also known as illegal immigrants, that are taking jobs at slave wages. It's an average. So they're just cooking the books, and please continue.
They're getting solid wage increases that exceed inflation, but there's really no evidence of inflationary pressure coming from the labor market, and we just have excellent, strong performance. The U.S. economy is performing better than any advanced nation around the world.
Okay, stop.
And
so here's the punchline. I'm going to give you the punchline. The U.S. economy is performing better than any advanced nation in the world. The U.S. economy, the government, to run this economy and even make it look this good, which is called putting lipstick on a pig, is borrowing $1 trillion every 100 days. The debt is now about $35 trillion. We're going to be at 36, 37 trillion, 36 trillion. I mean, I don't know where it's going to stop. And that's if nothing really extreme happens, like we have to put combat troops into the Ukraine, because then the debt's going to be 50 trillion. These people are lying to the American people. It's a lie. That's why we started out with Lie to Me by Brooke Benton. If I, as an American citizen, want to believe that I live in the greatest country in the world with the greatest economy in the world, that everything's just fantastic, that the Biden administration is fantastic, and I am able to look at the fact that we're going to deficit spend between 1.5 and $2 trillion this fiscal year. If I can overlook that and what that really means, because here's what it really means. If we took that created and borrowed money out of the economy, this economy would collapse overnight. The unemployment rate would be 15%. It would be the greatest economic downturn in American history. And it's $35 trillion. They've been doing this since, about 2000 in Bush. So this whole period of time, since 2000 in Bush till today, the government has been propping up the economy, propping up Wall Street, mainly Wall Street, to the detriment of Main Street. Because when I go shopping, it's not so fun. But of course, they don't include food in their inflation numbers. Why would they? It'd be too honest. When we say to the politicians, the people that are running the casino, no more lying. We are on the search for truth. They're going to respond because they want to keep their jobs in show business. But nobody's putting the pressure on them. We're just not doing it. So the issue becomes, what do we do? What do we do? Now I'm going to tell you very specifically what I am asking people to do. This is an ask. This is a direct appeal from my heart. We need to organize. There's an infinite number of things people can do. First of all, in terms of this content, there's shorts and there's, full-length podcasts on YouTube. Send them out to your friends and family. Ask them to join the community if you like the content. Come to X. Follow on X. There's a tremendous amount of content there. Repost it. Build your own social network. You are a Spartan if you want to be. You are the change we need if you want to be. And all you have to do is do it. Get up every day and spend some time on X, meet people, build your social network. So that's the social media piece to it. That's called using the digital media to build a community. Go to precinctstrategy.com. Go there. Learn how to get involved in your local party, if it's Democrat or Republican. I don't care. I don't care. Because both parties are corrupt, and it's one party, one uniparty. And why do we know it? Because the outcome of $34 trillion of debt, I mean, come on. $34 trillion of debt and an open border and an endless war hey, they're in on that together. I mean, there's no pushback because that's where we ended up. So both these parties need American citizens to go in. And when you go in, you're going to recognize that you're joining a private political organization, and you're going to need lots of people to go in with you to change these parties. So this is called what Barack Obama was, your community organizing. That means meeting your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, and talking to them about the things that matter most, the news that matters. Not being afraid to talk. And here on this podcast, I'm trying to share in the search for truth the ideas and the facts as I see them from my street corner, and the clips and the evidence that you can use to have an argument that's unifying and not divisive. You know, we don't want division. I am not about division. I'm about a new political philosophy that people can unify behind. Basically, an anti war movement. Worked great in the 60s. And man, I was there. We need it 10 times more now than we did then. Because back then, you know, they were saber rattling and nothing was going to get out of the center of the road because the people that were driving the bus were in the first turning and they had some respect for mass carnage. These secondhand jerk-offs that are steering the bus right now have never been punched in the beak. They've never had the water come out their eyes or had to go to the hospital to have their nose put back into place. These people have never known physical duress. Therefore, they're very willing to send my children to die in their war. And I don't like that. And I hope you don't like it either. And if we're going to protect the lives of our children and our parents and our friends and our family, we just need to organize. And I keep seeing this here in Minnesota. Nothing you can do. It's over. Blah. These people are getting paid to be negative. We need to be of good cheer. We need to have hope and faith because we don't understand the plan. We're just doing what we need to do. We're taking that next step. So I want to urge all of you to strengthen your spiritual borders. I talked about social media network. I talked about, being in the parties. You can be a letter writer. You can go to protests. But what we can all do, the fastest way to solve this issue, the most powerful way to solve it, is each one of us on an individual basis within ourselves restore our own spiritual borders as we see fit. When we restore our own spiritual borders, we don't need to be governed. When we're self-governing, when we live by our own spiritual borders, there's no need for an oppressive state. It will disappear and it'll be like dust in the wind. It'll go away. We won't need it. We won't want it. It will dissolve before our eyes like magic. The reason it exists is because we have not maintained our spiritual borders. We don't teach those spiritual borders to our friends, our families, and our children. And when there's no spiritual borders, people do things that are not cool, and they must be governed and controlled. It's just that simple of an equation. So the one thing everybody can do, no matter if they go into the parties, if they go on social media, if they go to protests, if they're letter writing, all those things are very ultra important. But the core is my own personal commitment to restoring my own spiritual borders. And once I've done that, I don't need to be governed. I'm self-governing. And that's what this country is all about. Giving each American citizen the right and protecting the minority right, because not everybody has to agree, to self-govern in the way that they see fit. And when we do that, it's going to be just like steam, going to disappear. Administrative state's going to disappear. All these materialists are going to say, wow, that looks pretty good. I want to get in on that. We need to be the example of the change that we hope to see in our society. And one critical issue, because I just went through this in my own political area here in Minnesota, because the Republican Party of Minnesota is bending over backwards to be not cool. And people are so pissed. I mean, they're pissed. I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Don't even fight with these people. And they got mad at me. And why I say don't fight. If we're going to create a new political movement that's unifying, we're not going to do it by being haters. We're going to do it by loving our neighbors as ourselves. So to the extent that we can unify around a new political ideology and restore our spiritual borders, we're going to be happy because we're not filled with hate and anger. So being happy is a responsibility to spread joy and goodwill and hope and faith one to another. This is how we take back the culture of the United States of America. So I want to go out with Stirred Up by Bob Marley because it's such a happy song. It's not political. It's about love. The singing is fantastic. The music is righteous. And I just want you to know that I have deep appreciation for your participation, that we're just getting going, that we can do this for a long time, God willing, and that God bless you and may you be well. I'll see you next week. Thank you very much for joining.